I'm just going to come out and say that ENTPs are the most badass type. If there is ever any type that I like fangirl over or get awkward around or just think that they're too cool for me, it's ENTPs. I think ENTPs are so legit. Like if I had to be like any other type besides my own, I would pick ENTPs because they're just so cool. There's just something about them that I'm like, wow, you're so cool. They're just really charismatic. There's something about FE in the third spot, which I'll get into if you don't know what FE is, that is really charismatic, and they're just like smooth talkers, really charming. Yeah. Anyways, ENTPs are one of my favorite types, one of the coolest types. I wish I could be you. So when a lot of people get into Myers-Briggs, what they know is like introvert versus extrovert, intuition versus sensing, but there's a whole level deeper than just those 4-letter dichotomies is what they're called. So Myers-Briggs goes a whole level deeper, and it started in the early 1900s with Carl Jung, and Carl Jung coined what are called cognitive functions. And so they're basically these 8 cognitive functions that kind of correspond to the way your brain works, the way you view the world, the way you make decisions, and each person dominantly uses 4 of them, and they interact in very specific ways. Since him coining that in the early 1900s, Dario Nardi came along and he hooked up different personality types to the EEG machine. He found that different personalities will tend to use certain regions of the brain more often than other personalities use that region of the brain. So it really is like connected to the way you use your brain, the way your cognition functions. And then when Myers-Briggs came along, what they did is basically gave them names. So they said, okay, if you use this function and this function, we'll call you the ESFJ. If you use this function and this function, we'll call you the INTP. And they basically just gave them names. And it's not really intended to be just 4-letter dichotomies like I versus E. And in my opinion, a lot of criticism from Myers-Briggs comes from like a lack of a deeper understanding about where it came from and what we're actually talking about. So that name, ENTP, is actually kind of a code, and I'll kind of explain like how from the name you can figure out what cognitive functions your personality uses. So the middle 2 letters are kind of the meat of it, the N and the T. And everyone's second letter is considered their perceiving letter. It's how you perceive information. It's what information you tend to take in, because when different people go through life and they have experiences, they're keyed in on different information. And so for ENTPs, that's through intuition. That's kind of like the patterns and what's not there, the what could be. And everyone's third letter is considered their judging letter. It's like not like judge in a bad way, but it's how you make judgments, how you make decisions. It's what criteria do you use to say this decision is better than this decision. And for ENTPs, that's a thinking judgment function. It's with your inner thoughts and what seems like truthful and logical to you personally. So the last letter shows which of those letters, judging and perceiving, because you might notice JP, judging, perceiving, it's which one of those do you show the world? Which one is extroverted? And so since you're a P, it means your perceiving letter is extroverted. So it means of your intuitions, you're oriented around the external intuitions. And extroverted functions expand and give possibilities and kind of explore. Introverted functions kind of go deeper in one area, and everyone has a mixture of both. And so for you having extroverted intuition, that's exploring all of the things that are not there. This could be a possibility, and this could be a possibility, and it's kind of creating and inventing. And those are the things that interest you. Those are the things that you perceive to be interesting. Since you extrovert your perceiving letter, it just automatically means you introvert your judging letter. So your thoughts are internal. You're not really oriented around the group's thoughts or authority figures' thoughts, but you're oriented around your inner thoughts and what seems logical to you personally. And then since you're an extrovert, it means you dominantly prioritize the extroverted of those functions and you secondarily prioritize the introverted one. So that means your first function is extroverted intuition, abbreviated NE, and your second function is introverted thinking, abbreviated TI. So that's how you find your first 2 cognitive functions, but like I said, out of the 8 cognitive functions that Carl Jung coined, every personality dominantly uses 4. So the way you find your third cognitive function is it's the direct opposite of your second cognitive function. It's the opposite of both letters. So since your second cognitive function is introverted thinking, the opposite of introverted is extroverted, the opposite of thinking is feeling. So extroverted feeling is your third function. And that's kind of keying on the external feelings of the group and what's appropriate and being conscientious. And the way you find your fourth function is it's the direct opposite of your first function. So since your first function is extroverted intuition, the opposite of extroverted is introverted, the opposite of intuition is sensing, so introverted sensing is your fourth function. And these opposites right here, so you've got 2 pairs of opposites. So like your second and third function are opposites, and they're kind of like a yin-yang. They're direct opposites of each other, but they come together and complement each other to create a complete picture, and these are called polarities. So when you think of like, if you can get a grasp on the definition of like your second function, for example, the opposite of that is your third function. So you can kind of think of them as like black and white, hot and cold. They're like opposites that come together and kind of give a little bit more of a well-roundedness. Same with your first and fourth function. So what I'm going to do now is go into describing how these operate in you, because some of these functions are strengths, some of them are weaknesses, some you'll more tend to heavily rely on, some you kind of ignore. As I go through these definitions and kind of explain like common ENTP problems and things like that, if it's not really resonating, you could be mistyped. Because the tests are pretty reliably wrong. So even if you can get a consistent result, it's consistently wrong. And in my experience, I mean, for some people it gets it right. Most commonly, I've noticed the tests are wrong by one letter, sometimes two letters, and it usually is accurate to that degree. So you may want to look into the INTP, the ESTP, the ENFP, and the ENTJ. And just kind of take a look, because ENTP may be a good descriptor, but then once you take into account these cognitive functions, there might be another personality type that's like a perfect, great descriptor. And as I get into it, if you want more information about these things, I do have a Myers-Briggs playlist called Myers-Briggs 101, and it starts from like most simple to most complex. So if you really want to get into this, or maybe if this seems a little too confusing, you can jump into that playlist first and then come back here because it's tailored to the ENTP. I also do personalized coaching. So if you would like kind of this information tailored to your problems that you're going through, I love to talk to ENTPs. I would love to coach ENTPs. That is totally my jam. So if you want like a type verification, I can help you out there or give you some coaching. The way you reach out to me is just by messaging me on Instagram. I love Instagram DM conversations because I find that people give more personal information. It's more real. So yeah, my handle's Alexis M. Kingsley. You can just DM me and then we can get a coaching session set up. So ENTP's first function is extroverted intuition. And everyone's first function is kind of who they feel like they are. It's the function that you use in the most contexts of your life. So you use it at work, you use it at home, you use it with your friends. In every area of your life, you tend to use your first function. And even if it wasn't supported by your parents, let's say your parents like maybe have a bias that they don't like this function, you still find ways to use it. And maybe in your childhood you couldn't, but like once you get into adulthood, you find ways to use it because this is who you feel like you are. And it's honestly very depressing to not use your first function. So extroverted intuition, what that means is intuitions are things that are not currently in existence. So sensory functions are you're in an experience and you're looking at this person's wearing this and this person said this. And you're kind of just, you're in the moment and you're listening to everything that's happening. But intuition is kind of looking at what's not being said. It's reading between the lines. So you are more interested in what's going on in between the lines than what literally is being said in the lines. So it's basically possibilities and what if. And since it's an extroverted function, it expands that. So it's like, this could be a possibility, and this could be a possibility, and this could be a possibility. So it leads to a lot of creativity, a lot of inventiveness. It's very optimistic, kind of bubbly, sort of. Loving to try new things, loving to travel, go new places, experiment with different thought patterns, maybe moving to a new city. Just loving new things and loving novelty and just loving seeing the possibilities. And this is a great function for ENTPs to use. I mean, I think people should kind of craft their career around their first function and their second function, but predominantly around your first function. So try to be in circumstances and in relationships where you really get to use this function, where you get to try new things and be creative. I notice a lot of ENTPs have their own business because you can just see the possibilities. I think if you're an employee and under someone else, that just automatically is going to cut the amount of possibilities way more than in half. I mean, you really are just going to lose a lot of opportunities if you're not your own boss. So I notice a lot of ENPs like to be self-employed. As I'm thinking about all the ENTPs I know, I don't know a single ENTP that didn't go away like right when they got out of high school. They graduated and then they moved somewhere far away, like several states away from their family. And I think that's just something with extroverted intuition. You want that time to explore, and I think that's a great idea. So the ENTP's second function is introverted thinking. And everyone's second function tends to be kind of an underused strength. And the reason it's underused is because it's introverted. Like you're an extrovert, this function's introverted. If you were an introvert, this function would be extroverted. And people don't tend to want to go to introversion if they're extroverts and vice versa. Because you like being extroverted. You get a lot of enjoyment and kind of like pleasure seeking from being extroverted. The only thing is that I feel like introversion and extroversion are both needs, in the same way that food and water are both needs. You might have a preference, like maybe you like food more than you like water, but still at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which your preference is, you need both. And the reason you need both is because they give you two different things. And that's exactly how introversion and extroversion are. You have a preference for extroversion. It's probably more fun. You get more enjoyment out of it. But ultimately, you need introversion, and it's in your best interest, and it will give you fulfillment if you can balance it with some introversion. I'm not saying you got to be 50-50, but you want to start moving a little bit more and more toward 50-50 as often as you can. Not that you have to be 50-50, but like you don't want to be like 95% extroverted, 5% introverted. It's just very unhealthy, because what extroversion gives you is it gives you impact, and it helps you learn new information. If you're around hanging out with tons of different people, you get a lot of new information. You have impact on them, they have impact on you, you get a ton of new information. Then what the introversion gives you is then you can then process that, and you can kind of filter out which of that information was good, which was bad, which of that information seems truthful and right to me, and you kind of can just filter out which information is good and which information is bad. So you need that introverted time to go deep within yourself to get that wisdom, the depth, the clarity. And then you can go out and extrovert and you can impact people. And with all that wisdom you've gained in your alone time, in your inner thought life, you can then go broadcast that to everyone and really help those around you and have impactful extroverted time. Because you can have introverted time that's not impactful. You can have extroverted time that's not impactful. And when introverts spend too much time introverting, they start getting into that non-impactful zone. As soon as you get to the extremes, you really lose impact. 100% introversion really loses any of that input. They then start kind of cycling over that small limited amount of input they had from when they extroverted. And then it becomes more and more and more and more incorrect to the point where it's not wise at all. There's no clarity on it at all. And they may start introverting in ways that are not deep at all. They might just binge watch Netflix, for example. You know, that's not a quality introverted activity. In the same way, if extroverts are 100% extroverted, they're just very scattered, way too busy, workaholics, running ragged, not processing how anything means to them. They're just kind of at the mercy and at the whims of all the people around them. And then at that point, it's also not impactful, because when you're around people, you don't have any depth or wisdom to offer people. It's just you're scattered, you don't feel present, and you lose what extroversion's purpose is, which is impact. So for ENTPs, it's important to get into that second function, and their second function is introverted thinking. And it's a potential strength, but it's definitely underused, especially in people who are in their teens and 20s. I find that younger people really have a tendency to want to skip over their second function because they haven't developed a full rounded like ambivertness yet. So introverted thinking is all about the thoughts going on in your internal world. It's what do you think is logical? What do you think is truthful? What is precise? What is consistent? And like I said, introverted functions kind of distill down to clarity. So introverted thinking takes thoughts and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper and more clear to the point where it's really splitting hairs. It gets incredibly precise, very careful with word choice, very precise with language and definitions. It kind of understands the slight difference between two words. I know two ENTPs who are lawyers, and they really enjoy kind of that splitting hairs, that logical component to it. Like I would think introverted thinking is very good at spotting loopholes in language. For people that lead with introverted thinking, I find them highly respectable, a huge sense of integrity. They just have earned a lot of respect because they clean out their own beliefs. Because going in your inner thought life and saying, oh, this is incorrect, and they just kind of clean it out in a very depersonalized way. They just kind of clean out any bad beliefs that they have. And when you do that for 40 years, you earn so much respect because your beliefs and your thought life are completely clean and ideally completely truthful. One thing I noticed for ENTPs is they may tend to skip over that chunk of time where you clean out your inner thought life, and they just go straight to their third function, which is extroverted, and they kind of like blast people with, you know, ENTPs get a stereotype for arguing a lot. And sometimes they don't have the TI to back it up. They haven't had the patience and the longevity, the time to really clean out their own beliefs before they start arguing with other people's beliefs. Sometimes they just will argue in the moment as a way of, in the moment, cleaning out their beliefs, but then that's kind of hurtful to other people. So it's kind of important to internally, in an introverted way, by yourself, clean out your beliefs and not use other people as your tools to do that. This is what gives ENTPs kind of a sense of righteousness. It gives kind of like a sense of right and wrong. This is who I am, and this is who I'm not. And this is the sort of thing that I think is kind of a logical, integrous thing for me to do, and this is the thing that's not. And it's firm on its beliefs. It's like, hey, I went on my inner thought life, and this is what I believe, and it takes a stand, and it plants its flag there. And I think for ENTPs, they've probably got a lot of messaging, especially if they've communicated things in a sloppy, argumentative way in their teens. They probably got the messaging that this function is bad. I've known a lot of ENTPs. I can think of 4 ENTPs that are the black sheep of their family. That they had too many arguments. They had 2 differing beliefs. The ENTP got into their inner logic and the family just didn't like it. It didn't gel with the family system. And they get kind of like severed off from the family. And by the time they get to be 18, they move and they're gone. And I feel so bad for ENTPs. And I think this function is really great for ENTPs to go to, but the problem is that culture has given you the messaging that this is not a good function. When your internal beliefs conflict with the groups, that's bad, and we cut you off, and we don't like conflict. And so I could imagine that ENTPs have got the messaging that they cannot use this function, and so they may instead go to the more socially acceptable function, which is extroverted feeling, which is such a problem for ENTPs. Like, I just want all the ENTPs to know, your inner belief structure is so important to develop. Even if your family doesn't agree with you, like the family you grew up in doesn't agree with you, that doesn't mean that there is something wrong with you. There may be something wrong in your delivery, and maybe the delivery needs to change. But the fact of you going in and assessing your beliefs and cleaning out your beliefs, that's not the problem. Like, the problem has not been the logical side of you. It may be in the delivery. It may be in maybe activities that you've done that are not in line with integrity. I've seen some ENTPs, especially when they're younger, not use introverted thinking, and that causes them to do kind of questionable actions, and that is what annoys the family. But I just want you to know that introverted thinking is not the thing to get rid of. Like, I want you to develop introverted thinking, especially for like women of this type. Like, I think male feelers and female thinkers kind of have a hard time, especially for ETP women, ITJ women, EFP men, and IFJ men. Those types that I just named are kind of, they have their thinking and feeling functions in the second and third spot. And when you do that, I think culture will tend to want women to be feelers and men to be thinkers. And so for women who are ENTPs, culture's not going to encourage you probably to get into introverted thinking. And in fact, I think that out of all the functions that culture encourages women to be, it's extroverted feeling. And so I could imagine for ENTP women that you are used to going down into this third function and you have just been used to shutting off introverted thinking, which is such a bummer. And the same is true for any of those other types that I mentioned, like the male feelers and other female thinkers. And it's such a bummer. It's so fortunate for certain types whose, when culture's values aligns with what that personality needs to work on, like, it just makes an easier path for them. But unfortunately, for some of the types that I mentioned, like, culture's just not going to encourage you to go in the correct direction. So you might really feel like you're swimming upstream for a little bit, which can be hard. So ENTP's third function is extroverted feeling. And everyone's third function tends to be like an overused weakness because it's extroverted, you're extroverted. If you're in your comfort zone, just in pleasure seeking, third function's where you're going to want to go. And extroverted feeling is all about the external feelings of the group. Nowhere in your functions do you have anything about introverted feeling. And so I think sometimes that's why ENTPs can come off abrasive, because I think ENTPs are one of the types least likely to get their feelings hurt. They don't have like an inner feeling function. I mean, everyone gets their feelings hurt sometimes, but I think for ENTPs, it's more like, that was not an appropriate thing to do. Why did that person do that? And they think of it more in that way. And so since they don't get their feelings hurt as easily as some other types, they just enjoy debating more. And so I think since they don't get their feelings hurt, they might make the assumption, like, why are these other people getting their feelings hurt? Like, what's their deal? But it's really just a region of the brain that people are using, and certain types are using different regions of the brain more often. So for types that lead with extroverted feeling, like if extroverted feeling was first, this makes people very warm. They make their homes inviting. They give people a hug. They smile all the time. They're keyed into other people's emotions and kind of vibing off how they're feeling. They really take control of the vibe of the room and they make sure that it's good. But for ENTPs and ESTPs, I've noticed that this can make them kind of like chameleons, and they can kind of change who they are depending on who's in the room. So maybe with this friend group, I have these beliefs. And when I'm with this friend group, I have these beliefs. I knew one ENTP that he changed his political party affiliation depending on who was in the room. So when his girlfriend was in the room, he was Republican. And when other people were in the room, he was a Democrat. And so you never knew which one he was. And it's just because I think this creates kind of a sense of insecurity. Like, ENTPs have been beat over the head so much with like, do not argue, do not have controversial beliefs. This is what's appropriate. Agree with the group all the time. And so that can lead to, like, if ENTPs are unhealthy, that leads to them not having strong inner thoughts, like not having strong stances on what they believe on the inside. So they just kind of change depending on who's in the room. I knew an ESTP, so this is kind of like, it's the same issue, but it's just slightly different. And he would say that he was religious in some settings and then not in other settings. So it's like, it kind of creates some trustworthy issues. Like, I think ENTPs are so cool. I almost dated an ENTP, and the reason I didn't is because I thought that he was going to cheat on me. There was not really any evidence of it. I didn't have any knowledge of him cheating on anyone in the past, but I just got that vibe. And I'm not saying that ENTPs are not trustworthy, but if they're unhealthy, they can be untrustworthy. Even if they are trustworthy and even if they are healthy, there is still something about them that gives off the vibe of untrustworthiness. So I don't know. The ENTP's got to work on that. It's just like maybe my own issue, maybe my own trust issues. But there's something about ENTPs. It's just like, I don't know if I can trust you. Like, you're really cool, but can I trust you? Sometimes with a little bit of introverted thinking mixed with a little bit of extroverted feeling, ENTPs can make people the butt of jokes. They can make kind of like bullying jokes. They're like kind of in good fun, but it's like, I want to make this group happy at the expense of this person. And so that can be kind of an issue. I think this is where ENTPs can lose their integrity. This extroverted process is going to lead them to argue a lot and really blast their beliefs out. And if they don't have that introverted thinking, which is a slow, methodical function, it uses its words carefully, it cleans out its beliefs slowly over time, and it gains integrity and respectability. And if they do not really try to get into that function, if they're just too much an extroverted feeling, this is what will lead them to, do actions that are not righteous. Like, I know a lot of ITPs, like, they have a strong sense of what's a logical or illogical thing to do. And I think for ENTPs, sometimes, like, I knew one ENTP who's cheated on probably like every girl he's been with. Another ENTP who was kicked out of the military. I randomly know a lot of ENTPs in the military. That's kind of surprising to me. I wouldn't have necessarily expected that. I know a couple ENTPs who have filed for bankruptcy, credit card issues, debt issues. And I think it's just because, like, with some of the ENTPs I know, it's like when they're in the room with someone, they want to be liked so much. I think with that extroverted feeling, they want everyone to feel good. And so that'll lead them like, hey, let me get dinner for you. And so they'll pick up the check for a bunch of people. But then when you do this for so long, it's like, I don't think they can afford to be doing this, like, with the lifestyle they have. I know some ENTPs into gambling. That's more probably an issue with not having enough introverted sensing, which I'll get to. I know one ENTP that whenever he gets a new girlfriend, he kind of like molds himself to whatever she likes. So with one girlfriend, he really took on cooking. With another girlfriend, he really took on motorcycling and just taking on these different hobbies. Like, I think extroverted intuition would like to explore that anyways. It's like, I really enjoy trying new things, so I'll try new things with you. But then they kind of take it and they mold it as part of their personality. And then as soon as they break up, it's completely gone. So it makes you wonder, like, did they really like it in the first place? I don't know. So I think as far as this goes, your second and third function are complete opposites. And so what I've noticed is with people's second and third function, it's kind of like a light switch that's constantly flipping on and off. And when it's up to the second function, that's kind of like the angel on your shoulder. And then when the light switch is flipped down, that's kind of like the devil on your other shoulder. And people are kind of, especially when they're younger, flipping back and forth very often. If they're really unhealthy, it's just flipped down a lot of the time. And so I think it's really important to kind of keep it switched up to introverted thinking as much as you can. Get that introverted time, process your beliefs, figure out what you think is logical, what you think is not. Figure out what, the issues with you, like, what have I done that is not of integrity? What beliefs do I have that are wrong? What beliefs have I learned from other people that are probably wrong? And just really try to check yourself. You first check yourself, and then after 40 years, once you've gained respect and you've earned the right, then you can check other people and kind of mentor other people in a more kind way. I think when TPs are young, they sometimes have issues with kind communication. And so I think, once you season yourself over 40 years, I think then you have the absolute ability to kind of check people. And it's important to use that introverted thinking in many contexts of your life. That's what you have to start working on. Like, I know a lot of ENTPs that use introverted thinking at work, but not really any other context of your life. So it's important to use introverted thinking, like, at church. What beliefs are correct at church? What beliefs, what thoughts are correct in your marriage? What thoughts are correct or incorrect with your kids? How could I be incorrect with the way I treat my pets? What about politically? What do I think politically? And try to integrate introverted thinking in every context of your life, more than just like one or two areas. And then you want to start using extroverted feeling. Try to make yourself only use it in positive contexts. People's back two functions, they tend to use negatively. So it's important to try to start using it positively. So instead of thinking like, oh, I don't fit into this group, or this group's not happy, so I need to make them happy by lying. Or I need to fit in, so I need to kind of twist the truth on what my beliefs are. Instead of being on the defensive like that, like, oh, here's a negative thing, so I'm going to do a negative thing to make it right. Try to just only see it positively. Like, have fun with your family or with your parents or with your kids, and just organize fun social experiences together. And, you don't have to be an extroverted feeling that much, but just try to use extroverted feeling only in positive context. Same with introverted thinking. Instead of using it so much to argue, which as a side note, I love to argue with ENTPs, so I feel very recharged after it. But instead of just using it to like argue and correct other people, just try to use it in a positive way, just a positive like cleaning out, like a spring cleaning of your beliefs. So ENTP's fourth function is introverted sensing. And everyone's fourth function tends to be kind of like an underutilized weakness because your first function and fourth function are opposites. And since your first function is who you feel like you are, you're not really going to ever flip the light switch down to this fourth function to just be someone that you're not. So in my experience, especially when ENTPs are younger, I notice maybe like 98% of the time they're in their first function, only 2% of the time they're in their fourth function. And it's fine. It's great to use your first function a lot. But the thing is that your first function and third function are both extroverted. And like if there's like a seesaw, if we put your 2 extroverted functions on one side of the seesaw and your 2 introverted functions on one side of the seesaw, that extroverted intuition is heavy. And especially when you're younger, that extroverted feeling tends to be heavy. So if you just try to outweigh those 2 extroverted functions with introverted thinking, it can't move the needle enough. These guys are heavy. Introverted thinking on its own cannot tip the scale toward ambiversion at all. So if you get a little bit of introverted sensing, maybe bump it up from using it 2% of the time to 10% of the time, it's like together they can move the needle. And you're probably still going to be extroverted more often than you're introverted, but it'll tip the scale toward health a little bit more. So introverted sensing is taking the senses. So you're in a room with people, you're talking to people, you take in what happened, you go on a vacation with someone, you take in your experiences, and then you process them internally and you organize them internally. And it kind of creates this narrative, all of your experiences adding up over time, and you organize them to show how they have all coalesced to make who you are today. It's like chapters of your life in a book, and they're building and they've created who you are today. So it's organizing your experiences internally. And from those sensory experiences you've had, all the experiences in your life, you kind of go inside and you make meaning from them. Here's this memory, and this is what it means to me, and this is how it's affected my life. Here's this memory, and this is how it's affected my life. And it's kind of reviewing and organizing the memories in your life. And it's kind of like a file cabinet of all the memories and experiences you've had and how they've kind of shaped you into the person you are today. So for people who dominantly lead with this function, they're very into pictures and memories. They usually like some souvenirs, maybe some small souvenirs, anything that's like a physical token of a memory that they have because they love going back and organizing their memories. They're usually very detail-oriented, stability conscious, because it's the opposite of extroverted intuition. And extroverted intuition is excited about all the new and novel possibilities. So introverted sensing, being the opposite of that, is more wanting safety, stability, staying in the realm of things that it knows, the tried and true. Introverted sensors are good in getting in the groove. They'll have a career and they'll stay with it for 40 years because they get really good at it. Introverted sensors are the types that really get better over time, really loyal friends. So I think ENTPs, they have this on the inside. They don't really show it to people, but they do have this loyalty, this stability. They have this sense of them a little bit on the inside. I notice a lot of ENPs really like bullet journaling, and I think bullet journaling is something that NE and SI kind of like together. SI kind of likes to record its experiences and be kind of detail-oriented like that, and then extrovert intuition kind of likes, I can use different colors, and I can have a different layout, and different pages new every day, and SI kind of likes the habit trackers. And so I've known an ENTP and an ENFP, a couple ENFPs and an INFP that are into bullet journaling, and they all have this NE-SI. And I think ENTPs have a little ISFJ on the inside of them. They don't really show it to people. It only really comes out in their closest relationships, so they do have this part of them. And I think if ENTPs could bump up this introverted sensing from 2% to 10%, it gives them a sense of loyalty. I know a lot of ENTPs that hop from job to job to job or from relationship to relationship to relationship when they're unhealthy. And introverted sensing gives you a sense of loyalty and stability. You know what? I'm going to get clear with my introverted thinking. This is what I want. This is the kind of career that I want. And with introverted sensing, once I get into that thing, no matter what anyone else says my career should be, this is what I want. And then I'm going to stick with it with introverted sensing for a long time. People that lead with introverted sensing are the type to be the best man at a wedding or the maid of honor at a wedding because they're long-term friends, the type of people that keep the same friend for 20 years. I think it's good for ENTPs to integrate a little bit of that. Introverted sensing is also very rule conscious, doesn't want to break the rules all the time. I think that'd be good for ENTPs. We gotta have rule breakers out there, but you don't have to do it all the time. And sometimes it gives you a sense of stability. If your family just sucks and they're unhealthy, and you haven't really done anything to blow up the relationship, then it's fine. You keep them at arm's length. But if you're the black sheep of the family because you've done immoral things or you've cut people off and you didn't have enough introverted sensing loyalty and a little bit of that rule following, it might be time to like make amends. Introverted sensing is very family oriented, has really good relationships with its parents and with people that, have been there for you in the past. And so this will give you a sense of loyalty to anyone who's really been there for you in the past to kind of keep those bonds strong. Do whatever you can to make those relationships as good as possible. You just do your part. I've known a couple ENTPs that have drinking problems. And so I think introverted sensing like helps you take care of your body. Do things that are good for your body. Introverted sensors are great about doing their yearly appointments and drinking enough water, putting on sunscreen. Like introverted sensors are good at that sort of thing. So I think, just for your body's sake, it'd be good to just, take care of it. My hope for like ENTPs is just that they can slow down and understand their worth. Introverted sensing is a very slow function. It likes to read a lot. Introverted thinking speaks very slowly, is quick to listen and learn new things. And I just want ENTPs to be able to, stop and slow down for a little bit and to not run from their past. I think introverted sensing can sometimes in a bad way just lock ENTPs into their past and feel a lot of shame about their past, which leads them to really get into extroverted feeling in the future. It's like, okay, well in the past I really messed up with my family, so now I need to just give them everything. I'm just going to give them 100%. I need these people to know I care about them and I'm going to give them everything. And I just want ENTPs to slow down and just, think about themselves, think about their own beliefs, and how you can be righteous and like how you can be loyal. Because I love ENTPs. I mean, there's nothing, like when I think about ENTPs, there's nothing that I dislike about ENTPs. I like their debater side. I like arguing and debating with them. They're really funny, very charismatic, good with their words. The only issue I've ever had with ENTPs is trustworthiness issues. And if you can just slow down, be there for the people over a long amount of time, be there for your employees or for your job, just hang on to things for a long amount of time. That's really my only critique, is just for ENTPs to not run from their past. And I think it's in your own best interest. Like, I know extrovert intuition really likes to explore things and try new things, but you don't want to be exploring new things because you're running and avoiding. You want to feel like your NE exploratory time is an offensive move, not a defensive move running from the past. You want it to just be an excited, joyful time where you can go just try something new. You don't want it to feel like, I gotta go so quick because I'm running for something that's catching up to me. If any ENTPs have messed up, in the last 5 years, maybe you did some things that you're not proud of. You just get into introverted thinking and say, okay, this is what I did, that was wrong, this is what I did, that was wrong. And you get clear with yourself to you, what beliefs are correct, what beliefs are incorrect. And just, you clean it out like a computer. Depersonalize, don't beat yourself up about it. And then you use introverted sensing to maybe go make amends. And if the relationships aren't repaired, that's fine. As long as you do everything that you can, because introverted sensing is kind of the long, loyal relationships that they'll stick with you. And so just make sure that you do every single possible thing that you can to mend those relationships on your part. Because I've seen kind of a pattern with ENTPs that they cut their families out, and then as soon as their families are on their deathbed, they go make amends. And you just got to think about, if push comes to shove and your family's dying and you're going to go make amends on that day, like, why don't you just do it now? I think ENTP's unique gift to the world is the way that they boldly pursue new things, the way they boldly pursue controversial ideas, new businesses. I mean, they step out of the box. So many people are asleep in life, and ENTPs really show us to go all out, to go all after it. If you want something, do it, jump, take the leap. And that is there's such a bravery with ENTPs. Any of the ETPs really they have a sense of bravery about them. When ENTPs get into introverted thinking, they gain so much respect. Introverted thinking is like the respect function. Like, to me, like if there's any function I respect, it's introverted thinking. They earn it. When ENTPs are healthy, they earn such respect. And when ENTPs are healthy, they show us what it looks like. They carve the path forward. They say, like, here's this new thing that we could do. It's scary to a lot of people, but to me, I get excited by it. And then they create a path for other people to follow. And what was once controversial in 100 years will just be normal because an ENTP carved the path forward. So I think it's so important for ENTPs to just do what they feel is correct, and to stay consistent with your political beliefs or your philosophical beliefs. Like, depending on who's in the room. Like, if you change your mind, that's totally fine. As you're cleaning out your beliefs, like, pivoting is fine. As long as, like, not in the same day, you're in two different rooms and you just lie. So I would just say for ENTPs, address your past, figure out where you stand now and the type of person that you want to be now, and then just take steps toward, being that person for the remainder of your life and being the loyal person that has integrity over the long run. Because that exploratory side, that joyful side, the funny side, that's just always going to be there. And I so appreciate ENTPs for that. As ENTPs get older, I've noticed you can be a little bit more well-rounded with these functions. So if you're, older than 40, because I'm not personally sure exactly how long the functions are developed for. I've heard some people say up until 40. I've heard different things thrown around. But, I think if you're older than 40, you especially can get into introverted sensing, I think, and that would be especially a function to work on. If you're in your teens and 20s, introverted thinking is the function to work on. And you can always just sprinkle in extroverted feeling in a positive way and introverted sensing in a positive way. Sometimes introverted sensing in a negative way is only seeing the negative in the past or being bitter. And this gives you a positivity about the past. You're what things were great about the past? How have they formed you? Why are you grateful for those experiences that you've had and how they've shaped you? Try when you're in your back functions to only use them in positive contexts and, try to integrate introverted thinking in many areas of your life. So if you're unsure about your type, you want a type verification, or maybe you want some type coaching, maybe you want some tailored coaching to your personal experiences, what issues you're personally invested in. I do have coaching. You DM me on Instagram, Alexis M. Kings. I'd love to chat with you. And I do have a playlist, Myersbriggs 101, if you want to know from start to finish, my thoughts on how to grow with Myers-Briggs. I will pop the playlist on the screen right now. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.